You're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. It's more fun to believe. Third year bonus. Hey everybody, it's Ryan Singer. Excuse me. Oh wow, that's a great way to start. Just kind of give a cough right at the beginning for people to hear that beautiful sound that happens. It was more of a clearing of the throat, let's be honest. How you doing? I am officially out on the float. I am traveling around the country currently for the next 3.5 weeks, so I'm trying to find the time and the spots and the appropriate material. To be able to get episodes up for you. So I apologize for the sporadic nature of things. Things have been very sporadic lately. You know, a lot of traveling around. Thanks to everybody in North Carolina who came out to shows. We had a really, really fun time in Asheville. Had a really, really fun time in Durham and then also in Wilmington. I had a really good time doing all those shows. So thank you for everybody. I mean, North Carolina is just so beautiful. You can't help but be driving around North Carolina and just seeing all of the wilderness and the mountains and the hills and the greenness of it all during this time of year and just kind of be taken aback by the beauty and the awe and just the gorgeousness and also of the remoteness of so many areas. Drove through Virginia a little bit, drove through West Virginia a little bit, and it's just there's so many forests and mountains and places to hide. If you're a creature. I mean, I suppose there's places to hide too if you're a person. I'm not exactly looking to go into hiding. Some people, that's the life they want. They want to just kind of go off the grid. I have fantasized at times of, finding a remote location that you can just kind of get away to. I think for very sporadic and short-lived trips. I'm not a person who thrives in solitude. I think the pandemic taught me that. I think there's a big difference between being productive and thriving. I was not thriving during pandemic, like many of us. Like most of us, I would argue. I am a social creature and I need to be around people. But after 2.5 years of being forced to kind of be in solitude, it's been a very difficult process for me to reintegrate myself back into being a social person. And May was Mental Health Awareness Month. So I hope you're doing okay out there. It has been difficult for so many people when it comes to the strain on mental health and, myself included. It has not been easy. It's not been an easy time. So I hope you're doing okay and it's okay to talk about it. I'm kind of a stoic person. I come from a long line of emotional statues in that kind of way where, if something's wrong, people in my family don't really talk about it. But, I try to be as open as I'm comfortable being with you on this program, without giving away all of my life to the airwaves. You got to keep some things for yourself, some personal tidbits and, feelings and emotions and stories. I don't know, maybe people who don't, become transparent beings of light. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think that's my calling at this time. To become a transparent being of light when it comes to sharing everything publicly. The triumphs and or the, defeats. I don't know. I mean, you say triumph, I guess you have to say defeat afterwards. Nonetheless, when it comes to your mental health, it's important to prioritize. I fortunately have a very good therapist that I see and talk to, ever since the Bigfoot experience in Florida 3 years ago. And so, that's been very helpful for me. So I hope there's someone in your life you can chat to who, is educated and professionally trained in such a way. And if not, I think the stigma is fading from seeing a therapist, but you should you should look into it if you think you need some help. There are people willing to listen. Okay, so speaking of willing to listen, this is a thought that's been crossing my mind continuously as I've been traversing and zigzagging across the country for the last few weeks. I guess it's been 3 weeks. Has it been 3 weeks, 2 weeks? It doesn't matter. The idea of what if we're wrong. One of the large problems in society when it comes to, politics, religion, cults, etc., paranormal included, is we don't want to admit when we're wrong or that we could be wrong. There's a big difference between admitting we're wrong and thinking that it's possible we could be wrong. I mean, doubt is just a natural part of thinking and believing. But when it comes to specifically what I want to talk about here today, it is regarding, are we okay with the fact that we might be wrong? More specifically, am I okay with the idea that I might be wrong when it comes to my thoughts, beliefs, and feelings surrounding the paranormal? And that's a tough one. I don't want to think about it too much. But I have been thinking about it a lot, so we are going to think about it. Well, try not to dwell on it. Okay, I don't know who this person is, but Shell Man, is that what we're calling? You don't need to think about these things too much. Okay, Shell Man, we're gonna bust open that shell. What if we are wrong? What if I am wrong about my beliefs and feelings about what the paranormal is and what the true nature of reality is? And that is kind of a big idea to think about. Because if everything I believe about the world around me is wrong, what does that mean moving forward? Does it mean a recalibration happens? Does it mean a break? Or does it mean digging my heels in, even though I know I'm wrong? Which is something you see so often, and I've mentioned it here before, but especially with cults, people who are in a cult where a cult leader has a specific date where they say something is going to happen. It does not happen. Over 50%, if I'm not mistaken, they double down. They stay in the cult, even though the cult leader was wrong. Because they don't want to admit that they were foolish enough to be wrong in believing this person. I think that's something we all can relate to in one way or the other. So, do we double down if overwhelming new information is presented to us regarding the phenomena that we believe is real, when in fact it is not? Or do we move forward with this new information, trying to integrate it into an improved, more accurate worldview? It's difficult. I mean, I'm not saying there is this information currently right now that would do such a thing. I mean, many of us in the world of loving the paranormal would argue that most of the rest of the world refuses to integrate this new information into their worldview moving forward by still denying the existence of such things as Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, other. Why is it so difficult to integrate this new information into our worldview moving forward and understanding that it is just part of the fabric of our reality? And in fact, it is true. I think it's fair to say that's pretty much the anchor point for the believer in the world of paranormal. But are we, in this world of believing, just as deeply dug in with our heels as the skeptic is? Chances are the answer is yes. What would it take for the believer to no longer believe. This is what has been occupying a lot of my thoughts as I drive across the country, looking at all these remote places where creatures clearly are hiding. Clearly, they are hiding there. It's a big idea to think about changing one's worldview. It's not something that happens overnight, I imagine. I can speak from experience. It definitely does not occur in a very short period of time. It is something that, slowly or at a medium pace, to harken back to an old Adam Sandler song, filters into your life and molds more like a potter working clay than, clicking a button and having a new page on a computer. It's more of a slower process that slowly takes shape, right? I don't know what the answer is for me necessarily, but we're going to try to explore it here. What information would be necessary for me to understand that my worldview is incorrect? Or that something that I thought was real is in fact explainable by other means? And I suppose scientific means, materialism, physicalism, as opposed to idealism. What would it take exactly for that opinion, that viewpoint, and that belief system to transform to the other side, to have a flip? And my guess is that it wouldn't be a total flip. It would just be a shift towards the other side, as opposed to, because I think we have to get away from this idea that it's either right or it's wrong. So it's either this or it's that. The duality of things, we don't like that here. Liminality is really where the juice is. For me, it's simple. I can maybe work backwards here. If someone was able to provide me with an explanation, evidence, and information regarding my experience in Florida that made it clear that what I experienced was an identifiable and easily explainable other animal, would I just have to accept that? The logical part of my brain is like, yeah, well, you would have to accept that. Like if someone came to me with infrared video and it was clearly a cougar or something, right? At the exact same time that this thing happened and I heard this thing, there's video, there's something, there's evidence of this other animal that is quote unquote normal right there that made that noise. I would just have to accept that. You would think, I would hope that I would do such a thing. Now you take that and examine that situation outside the context of all the activity over years that has been reported and all the other things happening there in that location. If you examine it independently outside of all of that context, it's just like, oh, a guy got scared by a bear or a cougar or something. Happens all the time. So, would that change my worldview? No, it wouldn't. It would give me a very easy explanation for a situation I was in that terrified me. And quite frankly, I would welcome such a thing. Wouldn't you? Would you not rather have a very simple, quote-unquote, natural explanation for an experience in your life that caused you fear and trauma? Or would you rather have it still be unknown? I think most of us would choose the easy and natural explanation outside of the paranormal or the supernatural. Would it change the way I view the world? No, I would still believe in these things. But, you know, I'm still watching Expedition Bigfoot Season 3. I think there's been 12 episodes. I don't know how many episodes they're going to have this season, but it seems like they're going to have a lot. There's interesting images and things happening on that show. Now, again, it's a television program. We can never be 100% sure about the authenticity and the legitimacy of what we're seeing. But what we can do is we can make a choice to believe in the authenticity and the genuineness of the people who are seeing these things. And I choose to do that when it comes to this show. We can talk more about that. Let's do a tiny little break here for some sponsorship. And we're back. You know, it occurs to me that, you know, there's lots of things going on in the world, and there's obviously great tragedies happening. There's also great miracles or supernatural events occurring constantly. I don't think there's, you know, no connection between the quote-unquote craziness that the world is experiencing. As we get closer and closer to full disclosure, I do think people's behavior might become a little more erratic, considering that they'll no longer, some of us will no longer have the bedrock of religious foundation and faith to rely on, understanding that the universe is much bigger than just Earth. Now, you can incorporate aliens and everything else into the concept under the big umbrella of God creating everything. That's not a problem. But, you know, the interesting thing is, these topics that we've been so in love with and fascinated with for years and have been kind of on the fringes or the weird are now becoming dinner conversation at regular dinners. And maybe it's just because people understand that I'm interested in it, that it always comes up to me, or they'll bring it up to me, which is, you know, actually quite likely the more I think about the logic of that. But nonetheless, I do like to believe that people who don't have a paranormal podcast are still sitting at dinner with other people talking about the UFOs and the reports and the hearing and all this other stuff. I do think that's reasonable to assume. And it's becoming more and more prevalent in just the everyday consciousness and thought process of the quote-unquote average person. When I say average person, I mean people who don't dedicate a lot of their personal life and or professional life to researching, reading, consuming, investigating paranormal phenomena. So that is interesting to me. And to me that indicates a shift in the viewpoint, right? And all words change. And, you know, and I've been a hard ass when it comes to, you know, using UAP. And, you know, maybe I got to soften my edges a little bit, but all words change. Like retirement is a word that's been a stalwart. It doesn't want to leave. Eventually, I think retirement will be referred to something else. I was thinking about this morning. You know, it'll be called phase 2 of life, I think, probably, or something like that, or you know, post drone. What are those bees called? Worker bees? Post work life. It'll be just called post work life or something like that. Because I think retirement has become this word that has all these meanings and associations attached with it. It's like, okay, now it's time to hang it up, hang up the shoes of life, which it definitely is not. It definitely should not be. So I think it'll be called phase 2 of your post work life. Anyway, you know, some people never have to work their entire life. Can you believe that? Do you think they're lucky, or do you think they're just like, do you think that would just be awful because you wouldn't really have a clear perspective on what it's like to be a person on the planet? And when I say a person on the planet, I mean just only because the majority of the planet has to work to survive. It doesn't have to be that way necessarily, I suppose, or at least thought of in that way. But nonetheless, I digress. So these topics and these ideas and these conversations are happening more and more at the dinner table, at the bars, whatever else, between people who might not necessarily have been having them previously. This to me is a key indication of the raising of awareness, of the opening up to the unbelievable, and to the acceptance of such phenomena as natural. I mean, we'd love to flip a switch in the paranormal world and just have all of the world immediately know everything is real. But that's just, unfortunately, I don't think that's how it works. Unless there's some major transcendent event that happens. That's just not going to be the way it works. It's going to be a slow crawl, even though we think we should at least be briskly walking. And I believe it is up to those of us who believe in such things to be guiding these walks for those who are skeptical. Because I think we all would agree life becomes much more interesting, more beautiful, more fascinating when you start to open yourself up to these things. You know, there's the good and the bad, obviously. But what we need to understand is just because we did something a certain way doesn't mean it's the right way for everyone else. You come across this a lot in stand-up comedy. People want to tell other younger comedians the right way to go about doing things. And that's just not the case. That's just not how the world works. That's not how things work. But more often than not, we believe that I did something this way. This is the right way to do it. And if you're not doing it this way, then you're incorrect or lesser than or not really doing the same thing, even though you say you are. You can see that play out over time, whether it's YouTube stars performing in comedy clubs and the pushback from comedians being like, they're not comedians. They're not comedians. Okay. Well, maybe we should expand our worldview and open up our idea of what a comedian is. I mean, I'm not going to argue that I never pushed back against that. I certainly did. Because I did things a certain way, and that's how you're supposed to do them. See how easy it is to fall into that? So when it comes to the paranormal, just because, you know, a light switch may have flipped for us, a transcendent event, which, you know, really birthed the true belief in phenomena, as opposed to just believing in it as interesting concepts or possibilities in life, but having a transcendent event that really anchored and fortified our belief in such a thing. Not everybody's going to get that. And to that point, what we were speaking about earlier, what happens when this transcendent event is then maybe potentially proven to be easily explainable by other means and therefore not paranormal? What effect does that have on us? Does that shatter us? Or do we double down, not caring? And it kind of reminds me of, in a certain way, you know, George P. Hansen, in his book, The Trickster and the Paranormal, talks about how hoaxing is just part of the paranormal. And it's part of the phenomena, in fact. So when it comes to like walking people along this path into believing, at what point do you weigh the pros and the cons? Like, well, if I just hoaxed something, like if you were given the opportunity to create a hoax, pull off a hoax that you knew in advance could not be proven to be a hoax, and this unprovable hoax, which would pass 100% as phenomena, paranormal, and would convert hundreds, thousands, even millions of people into believing and understanding that this is real. And let's also layer in another thing, that it is real, right? You're hoaxing something that is real. but you're just making it happen in a fake way for people to understand that this is real. You just haven't seen it yet. Let's throw that layer on there. Is that wrong? If it makes or creates a larger community of believers who now understand what is ultimately the real truth of existence and of the world around us. So they all come in because of a hoax. But what they're coming into is the actual reality of their existence. Is that okay? I mean, I think some people would say, sure. I don't fall on that side. I don't believe, even though you have a 100% chance of pulling off this hoax, and you have a 100% certainty that it will never be discovered that it was a hoax. Is it a hoax? If a hoax is in the forest and there was no one to be hoaxed, does the hoax even be a hoax? Does that make sense? I mean, call me maybe I'm being too much of an altruist, or relying on too much on altruism, but I don't think you should do that. I mean, because, what can we ever be 100% truly certain about? Well, I think that we can be 100% truly certain about this. We are experiencing some kind of existence. I think we can be certain of that. 100%. Now, the devil's in the details. What is the true nature of existence? I don't have that answer. But we are experiencing something. So, I don't think the hoax is doing anybody any favors. And it becomes a tricky, and listen, I'm not going to argue the fact that hoaxing or hoaxes exposed don't add drama and intrigue to the world of the paranormal, because they certainly do. People love that. People are drawn to that. I mean, look at popular reality television programming. It's all about drama. It's all about drama, secrets, intrigue, deceit. People love that stuff. And hoaxes fall into that category. Like the Patterson-Gimlin film. Is it a hoax? Well, there's people who say it is, and there's people who say it isn't. And there's people involved in an intimate level. At the origin point of such a thing, who disagree about such things. So how do you ever really know? It adds drama, intrigue. But I don't necessarily think we need that. I don't think it serves the purpose of pushing forward the truth in any kind of way, which is more of a dry, scientific kind of viewpoint. Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. So, we learn that Bigfoot isn't real, that it's a myth. What next? What do we do? And listen, I'm not going to argue against the skeptic who says, how come there's no evidence? How come we can't find it? We have all these people looking for it, allegedly. with all the best technical equipment, gadgets, and gear that, we have access to, and we are not able to find this creature. They're uncatchable. Well, yeah, and I mean, would Bigfoot be nearly as fun if it wasn't? I mean, I don't know. Think about it in that way. We're talking about drama, intrigue, and hoaxing. Would Bigfoot be nearly as interesting if it was easily caught like a squirrel running up a tree all the time? Probably not. I think part of the intrigue and the interest and the sex appeal of Sasquatch, if I can say that, is the fact that it's so evasive. It makes it very intriguing, makes it very interesting, the fact that we can't get this creature, even though people have seen it. I mean, that's the thing that trumps everything else for me. When it comes to this, I don't care how many seasons and episodes of Expedition Bigfoot there are that never catch a Bigfoot on camera, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. The thing that trumps all of that for me is eyewitness testimony, which doesn't hold a lot of water or a lot of weight in the scientific community, and I just don't care about that. Eyewitness testimony is history. Every history book you're reading is eyewitness testimony. I mean, do we forget that? Does the scientific world forget that everything we have is eyewitness testimony? Whether it's an instruction manual, how to build a dining room table, or a rocket ship, or the history of the War of 1812, or memoirs, biographies written about great people, all sourced from written reports, interviews, eyewitness testimony. Everything in religion is eyewitness testimony. The foundation of our world, of our existence, is essentially eyewitness testimony. And you're going to act like it ain't no good? You're going to act like it's unreliable? Well, then everything is unreliable. I think we can agree on that. I mean, hopefully. Can we agree on that? This is eyewitness testimony, essentially. Every episode of this podcast has been eyewitness testimony in one form or another. Why does eyewitness testimony not hold any water? Why is it so disregarded as not enough? It's kind of silly. It doesn't make a lot of sense. The court of law is based on, physical evidence. Eyewitness testimony is considered to be somewhat reliable, but also pretty dicey from time to time. So there is physical evidence, DNA, et cetera, et cetera. It's tricky. It's tricky. So when proven with evidence that goes counter to something we thought we experienced, what do? And I have not been confronted with this. This isn't like some big reveal at the end being like, and so it turns out, all the blah, 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 blah. Whether it's the shape-shifting or the Bigfoot or some of the other paranormal phenomena that I believe I've witnessed and experienced while doing investigations over the years, I don't have anything that has debunked or proven to be hoax, etc., in my own personal experiences. I'm just kind of doing a thought experiment here and being like, but what if, right? And I think we would have to be honest, and we would have to move forward, and we would have to be, vocal. You don't necessarily have to be vocal, I suppose. Not everybody has a podcast, but, it feels like everybody does. But the point is, there's nothing wrong with being wrong in this regard. It's okay to admit we were wrong, even though it's very, very difficult, as proven by what, some of the examples we talked about earlier. It's okay to admit that we were incorrect in our earlier assessment And I would argue that moving forward, it makes us bigger and better and stronger and more open. I think when it comes to credibility, I hear this from friends of mine from time to time, that there's credibility and understanding that you don't understand, right? And so how does someone have credibility in the world of the unknown and the paranormal and the supernatural? Well, I was working, a very funny comedian, Tyler Wood, and we did a couple different shows together last week or whenever it was in North Carolina. He's based out of North Carolina. He said to me, he said, the only reason I believe in some of this stuff is because I know you, and I know you're not a crazy person. And, other people might argue that. Other people might want to have an argument with him about whether or not I'm a crazy person. But, it's, the fact that I'm somewhat grounded, I suppose, is what he was referencing. So when it comes to all of these stories and all of these ideas, and you can go back and listen to almost any of the interviews over the past 8+ years of this podcast, and I would argue that there's a very high percentage, over 90%, of the people that I'm talking to who are sharing their stories, that you can sense and that you can tell that they're grounded in reality. And the only reason I say 90% and not 100% is because I don't understand. I can't be inside of your mind. I don't understand how you perceive other people speaking, but I can take a pretty good guess when it comes to a percentage, but I just can't be 100% certain, right? But I would guess that over 90% of the interviews I've done with people are very believable. And the reason they're believable is because I was believing them when they were being told, and the people seemed reasonable. They seemed like regular people. And that's the thing about the paranormal that's so fascinating, is the paranormal happens to normal people. When I first had the idea for this podcast, before I ever even started it, one of the taglines I wanted to use was, extraordinary things happening to ordinary people. And a friend of mine said that it sounded demeaning to call them ordinary people, when I wasn't thinking of it like that at all, because we're all just ordinary people, right? So the idea that extraordinary things happen to ordinary people, or extraordinary tales from ordinary people, something along those lines. But it was perceived by that person to be demeaning to the guests. So we didn't go with it. When in fact, I thought it was a pretty good explanation or description of the project I wanted to do. Now, there's been famous people on the show before. There's been well-known people on the show before. And, people enjoy that. People like that. It gets clicks, it gets listens, etc., etc. But I think what we want to explore here is the extraordinary happening in the ordinary world. That's what really fascinates me the most. Somebody you might never meet in your life or never hear of in your life, not because they're not an important person, but because they don't live their life seeking that out. Yet they've had extraordinary things happen. The stories that you wouldn't normally hear. Those are the stories that I've been kind of, seeking out over the years. And it's fun to talk to famous people, and it's fun to talk to well-known experts in the field. It's also, that's also true. But I think having conversations with people that are just living their lives and have experienced this phenomenon some way or another, does it not give more credence are those stories not more profound? Like, for example, if someone was to interview on their podcast, John Smith, who works in HVAC and has had multiple paranormal experiences. Let's say John Smith who works in HVAC, has had my experiences of paranormal nature. And then there's me, who is in entertainment. I'm an entertainer. I'm a comedian, right? I am public. I'm not just living this private life with children and, a wife, etc., etc. I'm someone who is out there actively trying to sell content to the world of media and entertainment, right? I perform, etc. Who has more credibility in this scenario? Ryan Singer, the entertainer, who's trying to entertain people with his jokes and stories, etc., or John Smith, who works in HVAC in Norton, Virginia, who's had those exact same experiences. I would argue John Smith has more credibility. John Smith has nothing to gain from said experiences and sharing them. Ryan Singer, me, I do have something to gain, I suppose. Well, not I suppose, certainly. I mean, I'm not trying to get into like motivations here, but I'm just trying to lay out this example. John Smith has more credibility than I do. I have a paranormal podcast where it behooves me to be experiencing these things. Now, that is a secondary result, right, of actually having these experiences. First and foremost, at the heart of this thing is just to share experiences, right, and try to, feel less alone and less insane in a world where these experiences or events or beliefs can be considered insanity, right? I don't know what do I feel like I have to defend myself against myself all of a sudden? What's happening? This thought experiment has turned into like a trial by fire. So nonetheless, what I'm saying is, I would argue that John Smith has more credibility. And will John Smith get as many clicks as, like Zach Baggins or, somebody who's very well known in the world of the paranormal? No, probably not. I mean, because this show, I don't know if you realize it or not, but this show is not as popular as like the Joe Rogan Experience. Not as many people hear me and Paranormal U as they hear like Last Podcast on the Left. Now that may be a shock to you, but I suppose it's not, because I don't have a home in Los Angeles and cars and all that kind of thing. And by home, I mean like I didn't buy a $2 million house. But the point is to seek out, to share, to understand, to connect. And I think we do that here. I've connected with so many people over the years. But what would happen if all of us were then provided information to show that all of these experiences, if there was one magic like philosopher, like the Skeptic stone, if there was the Skeptic stone, and they could give this to any believer who's experienced something, and this Skeptic stone could translate all these different types of experiences, ghost, alien, Bigfoot, etc., into the same reasonable scientific explanation that demystifies it completely and offers an alternative explanation, what would happen then? The Skeptic Stone. I like this, the Skeptic Stone. We might have actually, 45 minutes in, we finally got a tidbit that was somewhat interesting. I hope you've enjoyed the rambling thoughts of what if we're wrong. The Skeptic Stone. I will be doing tour dates in July. I'll be doing Parkersburg, West Virginia. I'll be doing, hopefully trying to get Knoxville on the schedule. Knoxville, Tennessee. I love Knoxville, Tennessee. I'll be doing Cincinnati in August. I'll be doing Chicago in August. I will be doing St. Louis in August. I'll be doing a small tour with one of my best buds, Dave Stone of the Boogie Monster podcast with Kyle Kinane. Dave and I are going to be going on tour together, doing a short run. He will be at Go Bananas in Cincinnati with me, opening those shows. I think I will be back in Detroit in October, but here's a secret. I might be back in Detroit before that, just for one night with my buddy Dave. I'm going to be other places. I'll be in Mason City, Illinois. I will be in, I'm just going to bring up the calendar so it's much easier to tell you. I'll be in Louisville, Kentucky, July 22nd, 23rd. Morgantown Brewing Company, that's July 18th. I will be Go Bananas the 18th through the 21st of July. The weekend before that, August 12th and 13th, I'll be at Helium at the Garage in St. Louis. Mason City Limits, August 5th and 6th. And then I'll be in Philadelphia and Buffalo, August 23rd and August 24th. And then I think we're trying to fill in the 16th with another West Virginia day. Anyway, I love you. I hope you love yourself. Hope you're taking care of yourself. Just because it's no longer May doesn't mean we should not prioritize mental health awareness and our own mental health. Please take care of yourself. Reach out for help if you need it. And I hope to see you at a live show. RyanSarenComedy.com/tour has all the tour dates and ticket links available if they're up. And so if I don't see you at a live show, I'll see you at the watering hole on the astral plane.